So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Swami Tattwamayananda Ji Maharaj.
Yonda pravishya mama vachimimam prasuptam sanjeevayadi akhila shakti dharasudhamna anyamscha hasta charana sravanatvagadin pranan namo bhagavate purushaya dubhyam. My pranams to revered Swami Abhirananda Ji, Sarvalokananda Ji, Prabhanananda Ji, and my namaskar to Swami Atmajnananda Ji, distinguished speaker, Professor Chidamsu Chakravarti, and all the distinguished listeners, friends, and everyone who is present here. As I was closely listening to Professor Chidamsu Chakravarti's talk, when he mentioned about the utilitarianism and also the uniqueness of the Vedantic concept of the absolute reality, God, I was reminded of a very interesting quote from a contemporary European thinker. He says, it's better to have questions that cannot be answered than having answers that cannot be questioned. A dictator God is the worst thing that we can ever think of. And if you want any doubts, to be cleared, you can read the contemporary newspapers, what is happening in Europe and elsewhere, where a dictator God is much worse than cutthroat atheism. The Vedanta conceives of the absolute reality as one divine principle that is present in everyone, everywhere, everything, including those who do not accept him. I am again reminded of a very powerful statement from Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda. You live your life in such a way that God will accept you even if you do not accept him. God doesn't require our certificate or permission to exist. Vedanta believes that God, the divine spark, is present in everywhere, in everything, including the hearts of the atheist, the non-believer. Now, coming to modern innovations, modern technology, modern science, and different manifestations of innovation, so to speak, that's the age in which we are living right now. Science is like a knife, very sharp knife. It could be in the hands of a surgeon, it could be in the hands of an assassin, a murderer, including all manifestations of innovation. Science has given us a number of blessings. Developments in science and technology, transportation, communication, healthcare, travels, and so on. But science cannot teach us how to make proper use of its own blessings, its own contributions. That's a problem. Science cannot teach us how to make use of the gifts of science and technology and to avoid making improper use of science and technology. It could be in the hands of a surgeon where it could save lives. It could be in the hands of a murderer where it could take away life. So only wisdom, and here I'm talking about wisdom as taught by Vedanta, because there is always a problem, as Swami Vivekananda used to remind us again and again. There's always a problem in believing a God who is sitting high in the mountains above the clouds with a heavy stick in his hands, with a list of do's and don'ts, and closely looking at the world, willing and promising us heaven if you obey him, and threatening with hell if you don't obey him. That idea of God is perfectly understandable, acceptable in Vedanta, but Vedanta goes a little beyond that. That's the only difference. Vedanta accepts every definition of God. It accommodates all ideas of monotheism, polytheism, henotheism, monism, everything. The Vedanta as interpreted by Adi Shankaracharya. In Shankaracharya they say, well-known verse in the Gaudavada Kariga, Sasiddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dudham Paraspara Viruddhyante Taihi Ayam Na Viruddhyati. Those who believe that their God or religion is the only true religion and God, and everything is false, they fight among themselves for their own constituencies, for their own territorial occupation. But Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, has absolutely no quarrel with anyone. In fact, that's why when Vivekananda appeared in 1893 in Chicago and talked about the religion, not necessarily Hinduism as we understand it, but rather the essence of Hinduism, the transcendental dimension of Hinduism. That's called Advaita in Sanskrit language. But Swamiji says, in fact, he gives a literal translation, O yedhamam prabadyante tab sadaiva bhajamiham mama varma anivartandi manushyaha partha sarvasva. In the Gita, Swamiji says, people of different traditions, faith systems, they follow God and religion and spirituality in their own way, according to their own taste, temperament, and their choices. We have no quarrel with them. All the same. Vasudhaiva Kudumba, the entire world is one spiritual family. You don't have anyone who is a stranger. You don't have to love your neighbor because you know you have no neighbor because you are non-different from your neighbor. You and your neighbor are the same. So this concept of spiritual unity, of existence, and the concept, the idea that the entire humanity is one spiritual family. Shankaracharya, again, in his commentary, he says, he gives a very interesting description. He says, you cannot hit your own head with your own right hand. So you cannot hate anyone. You will have compassion for everyone if you have devotion to God, because the same God exists everywhere in everything. Now this kind of wisdom, Vedantic wisdom, is the only concept that can teach humanity how to make proper use of the gifts of science and technology. Now, modern world, as I mentioned earlier, has improved human life. In all areas of life, we can see radical, explosive developments. But necessarily, science cannot necessarily give us success in the true sense of the term. One may have the highest job in the world, huge bank balance, a lot of wonderful things in this world, but his life will not be a success unless he has the mental health, spiritual health to enjoy the fruits of that success. You may have millions of dollars in the bank. You have to take 4 pills every day to take 4 hours of sleep. That life is not a very successful life. If you push the boundaries of innovation and science and technology beyond the limit, we are bound to end up becoming machines or morons or madmen. There is a very ancient Sanskrit statement, it comes in Kathasari Sagara. It's an ancient work like in a Panchatantra, Aesop's tales in Western literary tradition. It says, Yeppuman atimedhavi chadurnam ekamasnude atpayu anavadyova daridra padito piva. This statement is nothing frightening, very simple common sense. You know what it says? When you achieve something absolutely wonderful, magnificent, let's say the highest paying job in the world, the most influential position in society, lot of people admiring you. So you have pushed the boundaries of your own intelligence, your own accomplishments to the highest level. Now, along with that, you need a spiritual ideal to follow. Otherwise, what happens is our mind falls sick. You can see this great musicians, great artists, great novelists, Dostoevsky. Think of a man like him. Crime and Punishment, Brothers Karamazov. I used to quote the Grand Inquisitor frequently, the 5th book. The greatest novelists, writers, musicians, artists who achieve great things in life, but they can't get peace of mind without artificially making themselves forgetful, because we want to run away from our own mind, because our mind is chasing us. For that, people take to alcoholism or drug addiction. Because when you push your mind beyond the limit, mind falls sick unless you have a spiritual ideal to follow. That's the meaning of the statement. A person can become, patida means fallen, mind can go bad, or one may go abnormal. Therefore, because when you push your mind to such a high level, the higher you fly, lower you fall. Then you need a cushion when it falls down, so that you don't break your neck. And the cushion is spirituality. You find some of the greatest musicians in Western tradition also. Bach, Tyagaraja, Virendra Dasa. In Eastern tradition, also Western tradition. Great artists, some of them had some higher ideal. You may not necessarily call that a religious ideal, some higher ideal to follow, to cherish, to chase in their life. And that is the cushion that mind needs when you push your mind, your mental powers to a higher level. That's why Charaka Samhita defines mental health, healthy mindedness, so to speak. Prasanna Atmendriya Manaha Sostha Iti Abhidhiyate. Who is a Sostha? Of course, before that there is a definition of physical health, samadhadu malakriya hekshata. And that is Ayurvedic concept. I'm coming to that. Here, prasanna atmendriya manaka. When your body, when your senses, your mind, your emotions and feelings are in a state of perfect equilibrium, in a state of serenity, contentment, then only you can be called a healthy person from a psychological, from a mental perspective. And what is the definition of mental health? When your mind doesn't bother you. What is the state of physical health? When you have a stomach pain, your body is reminding you, I'm here. When you have a headache, head is reminding you, I'm here. But when your body doesn't remind you of its own existence, it means you are perfectly healthy. Similarly, when we have no anxiety, no worry, perfect contentment and serenity, it means you can go beyond mind. Going beyond mind is the only way to enjoy mental health. Going beyond body is the only way to enjoy perfect physical health. And Vedanta tells you that if you nourish your mind with proper nutritious food, your mind will remain healthy, just as your body remains healthy when you feed your body with proper nutritious food. And if you eat bad food, if you drink bad water, you fall sick and you die. Mind also falls sick and die. Why? When we do wrong things, this drug addiction, or what you call mobile phone addiction, internet addiction, when machines take hold of us. And machine, just like frequently you find in San Francisco streets, dogs are walking the owners. The owners are not walking, dogs are taking them for a walk in the morning. Because the owners have no choice but to follow the dog. Dog take liberty in its hands. Like that, frequently what happens, our emotions and feelings, our anxieties and worries, our problems take control of our life, and then what happens is we become victims of anxieties, worries. Now, science and technology, innovation has absolutely no remedy for this problem. only spirituality. And what kind of spirituality? A spirituality doesn't threaten you, that doesn't offer paradise and doesn't threaten you with hellfire. A spirituality that takes you the conviction that your fellow human being is as much a human being, is an embodiment of the same divinity as yourself. And that's why when I talk about Vedanta, and this frequently happened, it's a very interesting thing. Shankaracharya's motto, you may call it slogan, was Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. So frequently, in some very non-authentic translations, you can always find this word. Mithya means dream. World doesn't exist. Is absolutely wrong. What Shankaracharya said was, this world, all of you, this chairs, this mic system, like this won't exist for all time. The trees and mountains that we see around us won't be there after some billions or millions of years. They all come and go. They are vyavaharika satta. They exist for some minutes, maybe an insect. They exist for some years, some hundreds of years, maybe a tree. Millions of years, oceans and mountains, they may exist. But they also belong to that category of the fundamental impermanence, which with, of course, Nagarjuna's system called it Samvriddhi Satta. What it means is, so if we can look at everything in this world, not as the absolute, but the non-absolute, not non-existence, but something that exists. If you get some information from your doctor, you have a health problem, you need to undergo treatment. You won't be shocked if you believe, because body is bound to fall sick. Body is not a statue. Body is not the Olima Mountains. It will remain. It won't be there all the time. So, what Vedanta tells us in its philosophical, in doctrinal dimension is, everything in this world is impermanent. That's a wonderful spiritual common sense. We can apply this in your innovation laboratories. If you are an employee working with the Google, the professor was talking about Apple. Even a scientist cannot deny the fact that things in this world are changing, are bound to change. So, why should we worry? So, Vedanta is a great system of psychological counseling. The simple spiritual common sense, everything in this world is perishable, impermanent. Real, but only in the relative sense, not in the absolute sense. It doesn't mean that Vedanta tells you the world is dream, world of you are not here, I am not here. That's not what Vedanta says. Shankaracharya was one of the greatest brains the world has ever seen. He was not an insane person to say that you are not sitting there, I am not standing here. Vedanta doesn't say that. So what I mean to say, at a philosophical level, Vedanta tells us that everything in this world is bound to change and will be bound to disappear one day and take another shape. Another very important aspect of Vedanta is this divine spark is present in all of us. You don't have to achieve that. You don't have to go after that. So frequently, I frequently quote one, there is an important sutra in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the Kaivalya Pada. Nimittam aprayojagam prakritinam varana vedastu tata kshetrigavat. It's a very simple matter. You think of a farmer. A farmer is trying to irrigate a field. So there's a river, there's a pond, maybe it's a well, maybe some distance away, he has to bring water and irrigate the field. And you have to cut a canal, half a mile, 1 mile. What he is doing is, he's removing the soil, the sand of that route, the line of the canal. He's not digging a canal, he's taking away all the soil. If you have a granite stone, and if you're a sculptor, you're trying to build a statue of Buddha, you are chiseling away all unnecessary parts from the granite stone. And the result is Buddha emerges. Buddha did not come out from outside and sit on the stone, you removed all the unnecessary parts, chiseled away all those parts. The result is Buddha has lived like that. If we can clean our mind, if we can think of our own true identity, we can think of the fact that we are essentially a divine reality. Not the physical body as such, of course, but there is within this physical body, there is the divine spark. And that's our true identity. Once we can remind ourselves of this, we can live in this world, but we can live in this world more intelligently. We can face problems without being shocked by the problem. So when you understand the nature of the problem, you are not solving the problem, but you are gaining a new ability, new power to manage the problem, to handle the problem. The problem is no more a problem. So Vedanta has got something very interesting. And if you are looking for an example, I think Professor incidentally happened to mention. If you look at the Mahabharata, see, the most wonderful character of Mahabharata is Lord Krishna himself. Lord Krishna was a unique symbol of perfection as far as you can think of in this world. He is a unique blending of the highest idealism and the highest realism. If you are a pure idealist, it can become some kind of utopian idealism, which doesn't really exist. If you become too much of a realist, you end up being a utilitarian. And that can cause us to stoop to the lowest levels of utilitarianism, judging everything by the practical usefulness. Vedanta helps us to achieve a higher level of creativity. People who are not familiar with the scriptures may think, and this is one problem, that Vedanta is some kind of a life-negating, world-negating idea. If you look at the interpretation of Swami Vivekananda, in a practical Vedanta Professor was referring to, if you look at the practical Vedanta, Swamiji says, every action can become an act of worship. Every word can become a sacred mantra. Every moment in your life can become a meditation. Every thought can become a contemplation. Swamiji, in fact, the credit for bringing the Vedanta to this modern age, especially Western Hemisphere, that credit goes to Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji interpreted Vedanta as an ideal for this age. On the one hand, it presents you with a universal ethical ideal. Is it the highest, Swami Vivekananda says, the highest act of spirituality is looking at our fellow human beings as an embodiment of the divine. The human soul is the Taj Mahal of temples. So this exact quotation. It's a paraphrase. What's the highest, most noble, what's the holiest temple in the world? The holiest temple in the world is human being. And what's the highest worship? Serving other human beings. Now, if one can take up this ideal, you can become a very creative, a very enlightened executive. And innovation, as I mentioned, innovations, any kind of innovation, any manifestation of science and technology, without some higher ideal, can become a knife in the hands of an assassin. Otherwise, it becomes a knife in the hands of a surgeon. Every manifestation of science and technology can become a blessing. Also can become a curse. Because, as I mentioned, science and technology do not teach us how to make proper use of their contributions. And that comes from spirituality. And that spirituality, in its most universal sense, is Vedanta. Vedanta is a kind of a universal spiritual humanism. On the one hand, he is extremely humanistic. Not humanism in its religious or sociological level, but humanism in the spiritual level, where every human being is an expression of the same divinity. So he cannot hate anyone. If you are worshipping your God in the temple, you cannot hate somebody standing outside the temple. One of the most sublime definitions of an ideal devotee in Vedantic tradition, the Bhakti tradition, Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashet Bhagavad Bhavam Atmanaha Bhudani Bhagavati Atmani Esha Bhagavatottamaha. In the Bhagavata Purana, remember, I am not quoting some old books. You find it's very, very modern. Very, very modern. Very humanistic. Who is the best devotee in the world? Devotee of God. And he also is the best human being, because this definition says that the true meaning of Vedanta, the true meaning of spirituality is you become a good human being. Whether you believe in God or not, if you are a good human being, you are spiritual. Because spirituality goes beyond religion as normally understood and defined in the intellectual circles. So this particular expression says, Sarva Bhudeshu Yapashet Bhagavad Bhavam Atmanaka Bhudani Bhagavati Atmani Esha Bhagavatottamaha. 3 levels of Vedanta or spirituality are mentioned in 3 different verses in the 11th Ekadasa, 11th book of Bhagavata Purana. It's a dialogue between a king, a philosopher king like Plato's Republic, and 9 sages, Nimi Navayogi Samvada, a dialogue, a conversation between 9 enlightened philosophers and a king. The king puts one question each to each of these 9 sages. One question is this: who is a real human being? He says, the one who believes that the God whom he worships is present in everyone, and everyone is present in God. Now, this is not just a talk on religion. It's talk on spiritual, universal spiritual humanism. The highest devotee of God is not necessarily one who goes to a temple or a church or any place of worship every day or reads the scriptures. But the highest devotee is one who believes that everyone lives in God and God lives in everyone. This is the very wonderful understanding. Now, what I mean to say, Krishna says in the Gita, this can be practiced in everyday life. If you are a scientist working for Oracle or Apple or whatever company you are working, you can practice it. How? Again, I have to quote from these ancient verses, because it's not coming from somewhere modern books or nothing, I don't know. All these are mentioned in our sacred literature. Saktaha karmanya vidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryan vidvan tatha asaktaha chikishuhu loka sakram. It's a verse. Meaning is this: suppose think of 2 persons, 2 individuals, the 2 brothers, so to speak. One person works very hard, very efficient, very enthusiastic, very successful, but very anxious, very much worried. Anytime he may lose his job, he may lose his promotion. He may be a billionaire or trillionaire, but if he loses $1,000 in the stock markets, he'll collapse. He is a billionaire, but he will collapse, he will be devastated if he loses $1,000. That's one person. Saktaha, karmani, avidya. Avidya means those who do not know Vedanta. They are attached. Every minute, every second, they are thinking, contemplating, meditating on this money, achievements. And the result is, life is in a vacuum. Life is a failure. Job is good, a big car, big mansion, but life is a failure. Because saktaha, attached, obsessed. The word attachment in Vedanta, I should explain this. So it can be misunderstood. It means obsessive attachment in such a way that you become enslaved spiritually, mentally, psychologically. You become enslaved. That's the meaning of attachment in Vedanta. Not only attachment of a mother for the son, for the children, not at all. Often people terribly misunderstand and misinterpret Vedanta. Oh, Vedanta tells you attachment is bad. A mother's attachment to son is bad. No, that's not what Vedanta is talking about. Vedanta tells you this much. When you become so obsessed and attached to money, and if you're a billionaire or trillionaire, and if you lose $100, you collapse. That is the meaning of Sakti or attachment in Vedanta. What is detachment? Detachment is simple. You understand the stock markets are not meant to remain stagnant. You can't expect the same bank balance every day, every minute. You can't expect your body to remain healthy and strong for 150 years, 1000 years. When you're 100 years eating organic food, going to gymnasium, you may live for 100 years. That's all. Sick body is bound to fall sick and disappear. Even a crematorium manager doesn't remember this. Every day he is pushing the body to the tube. But if he falls sick, oh, my life is gone. He should know, one day I also will go through this tube. Does it mean that he should not undergo treatment? But he should not lose his mind. With that intelligence, with that level-headedness, you have the spiritual common sense. That's the true definition of Vedanta. Spiritual common sense. It helps you, even you are living in this world, working in this field. Whether you are a scientist, you are a technologist, or you are a musician, whatever you may be doing, keep in mind everything in this world is impermanent. Impermanent. Not unreal, but impermanent. When you keep this in mind, we can handle this world. And this wisdom helps us to make proper use of the gifts of innovation, the gifts of science and technology. Because it gives us kind of spiritual common sense, it makes us more sober. So what happens is, frequently we forget this. And we become so much attached to everything, and we define and we interpret success only in material terms. When we forget that success is success only when you can enjoy the fruits of your success. So I'm going back to the old verse. Saktaha karmani avidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryan vidvan tatha asaktaha jigrishu lokasakra. The person is obsessed, saktaha. Money, wealth, status. It means he is living and thinking, contemplating, meditating only about money, success and material entities. That's a people. He is successful, but he cannot enjoy life. The other person, Kurya Vidwan Tatha Asaktaha Jigishu Lokasangram. His brother, let us say, or his friend, he is detached. What does it mean? Detachment doesn't mean indifferent, negligent, or you don't identify with anything. Detachment means, well, if money is lost, it doesn't mean money is lost, money will come back. If success is gone, the failure also will one day change. So this pain and pleasure, or you could sukha, dukkha, etc. Success and failure, they come in rotation. So his mind is calm and quiet, but he is not inactive. He is not inactive. In fact, one of the definitions of yogi in Gita is, he says he does everything, but he does it with great efficiency. Yoga karmasu kausala. Efficiency in action. The highest karma yogi is one who does everything. He may be making use of science and technology. He may be a modern person. And he may be very successful. But he remembers one thing. This success won't last long. This success will not last long. Failure also will not last long. Sometimes we forget that. When we are facing a problem, we wrongly interpret that problem as something permanent. Enjoyment is not permanent. So misery also is not permanent. This is something interesting. If success is impermanent, failure also is impermanent. So a person who is detached means he has this wisdom. That's actual meaning of Jagat Mithya. These terms are frightening. People think, oh, Shankaracharya said the world doesn't exist. You all go to forest and grow a beard and sit somewhere. No. I was talking about you have to combine action and contemplation. Live in this world. And Swami Vivekananda, referring to this idea, world is a gymnasium for us to work out our karmas. This world is a place where we should work hard. You go to gymnasium not to live there, but to do exercise. Like that, this world is a gymnasium. We do our work, we do our duty, we go through some difficult times, we go through some happy situations also. But we remain untouched, detached. But we never become inactive, inefficient, negligent. Actually, some of the greatest karma yogins in the world, some of the greatest Vedantis in the world, were the greatest workers. I can give two examples because contemporary. One is Shankaracharya, Vivekananda. Think of Shankaracharya, the exponent of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. If you look at his life, 32 years. And what he did, he went all around Indian subcontinent, including today's Afghanistan and Tripura, right from extreme south to north and extreme east to west, 4 times. He wrote the most profound spiritual, philosophical classics in Sanskrit language. Not Upanishads, Bhashyas, Gita, Brahma Sutra, and innumerable foundational books. And Shankaracharya is the greatest devotional poet in Sanskrit language. 139 devotional poetry he wrote, poems he wrote. And he is the founder of 10 monastic orders. And also, he is one of the greatest debater, philosopher. Who says all this? Sister Nivedita. The most telling, the most moving commentary on Shankaracharya's work, and his physical work, so to speak, Karma Yoga, comes from Sister Nivedita, who was a radical revolutionary, an Irish woman. Miss Margaret Noble was a disciple of Vivekananda. She writes in Web of Indian Life. There are two pages full of this, he says. And then she says, after giving a long list of Shankaracharya's work, activities, she says, this is a greatness that we can never understand, but can only appreciate from a distance. But take Vivekananda. We are standing here, we are discussing Vedanta, because one unknown monk came to this country, 1893. Parliament of Religion is a delegate of Hinduism. Nobody knew about him. He did not have the recognition of being the founder or representative of an official body at that time. And he gave a talk. The Chicago address, the first talk will be around 6.5 minutes. Less than 2 pages, 1.5 page. The first Chicago address. That's the beginning of the Vedanta movement. And he worked in this country. For 4 years he preached, went to India, started this monastic organization. Now it has got 320, 340 centers around the world. And he lived only for 39 years. Shankaracharya lived for 32 years. They were the keeping quiet. They were the Advaitis, the Vedantis. They were much more active. If we can combine the efficiency, the creativity, the innovative spirit of a Bill Gates or other great innovators of Bay Area, and the contemplative spirit of a sage, a saint, that's a real picture of an ideal Vedanti. He works hard, he's efficient, he's enthusiastic, he's a great organizer. Shankaracharya, Sister Devi says, he founded 10 monastic orders. The Jesuit order was founded by Ignatius Loyola. Franciscan order by St. Francis of Assisi. And Dominican order by St. Dominic where Shankaracharya founded 10 monastic orders, one of which is part of our own tradition. And Swami Vivekananda did only for 39 years. Now, can you compare any executive, any great innovator, to any of these great teachers in terms of efficiency, sheer efficiency, sheer management skills? Where did it come from? Or some of the great disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. They were not graduates of Stanford or Harvard Business School. Don't mind, he's a graduate of Stanford Business School. But you can't compare any of them with a Vivekananda or a Shankaracharya. Why? Because they worked hard, they managed, they organized, but they did everything as a Vedanta. So if you can bring Vedanta into the internet, into the Bay Area, somebody working with CEOs, company executives, if you can bring Vedanta, then you can go on working hard, but you look at this world and you don't work as a play. See, if you are playing football in the evening, you won't get tired. Suppose you work in a computer, let's say company, computer office for 15 hours, you get tired. But evening you go for playing football, you don't get tired. But a football professional, when he gets tired, he plays computer games. So you can imagine, a football player considers computer as a game, as a play. And a computer specialist looks upon football as a game. So if you can look at this world and this life as a play, that's what Vedanta teaches. Lokavatu Leela Kaivalya, one of the sutras in Brahma Sutra towards the end, it says, this world, this life is a play. So you play with all enjoyment, all happiness, all creativity, all innovation, and all enthusiasm, but remain detached. It means you work hard, don't get crazy about it. You don't allow yourself to be enslaved. You don't lose your freedom. You don't become a prisoner of success. You don't become a prisoner of the profession you are doing. You look at a profession as a play. This is a very unique paradigm. I don't have enough time. I think I'm approaching the end of my time, I believe. But our moderator requests me to speak for a little more time. But now the point, what I want to mention is, this Vedanta can take us to a higher transcendental level of creativity. Now, creativity can happen only when we take our mind away from this world. You find every great creative artist, and that creativity includes the brilliance of novelists, poets, writers, philosophers. You have to take your mind away and far away from the empirical concerns. Then only the mind gets linked to the non-mind, what we call Atman. So frequently, it is said in our Ayurvedic tradition, you have to go beyond mind to achieve mental health. So when you link your mind to something that never falls sick, then mind always remain in a state of perfect health. A tiny stream should be linked to a mighty river, then you get perennial water throughout the year. But if the stream is not linked to a perennial source of water, then you get water only during summer. During rainy season. During summer, the stream gets dried up. Like that, our mind should be linked to something transcendental, something that goes beyond mind. Then, mind always remains in a state of health, serenity and peace. And Vedanta is an excellent tool, a means, a source of this higher creativity. A creativity that keeps you sober. That doesn't require, that helps you to remain away from drugs and other forms of addictions. That's what important. So frequently addiction happens when you want to run away from your own mind. Terrible thoughts will drag you towards alcoholism and drugs. But you want to run away from your own mind, your own memories. But when mind is linked to this higher source of peace and contentment and tranquility, then it always remains in a perpetual state of health. I say, prasanna atmendriya manaha. When our mind, our senses, our inner spirit always remain in a state of perfect, natural, spontaneous state of contentment. Contentment means you don't look for something else for satisfaction. You kind of inner contentment. And this is possible in modern world. And in modern times, Swami Vivekananda, he expounded this karma yoga, which essentially means we should combine the best of the modern and the best of the traditional. The best of modern scientific, rational achievements, and also the ancient spiritual values. Action and contemplation. Inner contentment within and perfect harmony in dealing with everyone else around. This is a very wonderful, unique spiritual paradigm that Vedanta presents before us. Thank you very much, and we'll have more discussion during interaction, Q&A. Thank you.